Welcome back to our Grand Slam preview special here on At the Races. Looking forward to the big autumn events. We'll talk Melbourne Cup, we'll talk Breeders' Cup, we'll talk British Champions Day. But right now we're continuing with the Arc de Triomphe, which is, of course, just around the corner, and you will be able to watch live with us on At the Races. We've talked Trev. I think we've exhausted Trev. We've talked about her time form racing, heard from connections and so on. But we mentioned Novelist, didn't we, just before the break, the King George winner, the brilliant King George winner. One of the things about that, James, I can't remember whether you asked it that day or not, but I remember talking to you before the race, and we both liked his credentials, the German horse, and we talked about the strength of the Germans and so on. But there was a slight worry about him on quick ground, wasn't there, going into that race? And
I think, I mean, I personally think that Orfèvre is the horse, if it gets really bad, which I don't think it will. I don't pay much attention to long-distance weather forecasts because they're normally so wide of the mark. Yeah. But and I also think, I mean, we had an emailer earlier on to Enzo suggesting that it's going to be good soft ground. Not necessarily. You've had 2 or 3 fast ground arcs in the last 10, 15 years, so that doesn't necessarily hold water, that argument. Yeah, he's by Monsoon, Novelist, and that normally means soft ground. We'll improve for soft ground. We'll definitely improve for soft ground. But I was getting vibes before the King George, because I sort of thought it was beginning to get quite quick for that he was the exception that proves the rule, that actually he's potentially a Monsoon progeny that goes better on fast ground than on soft ground. He'll definitely handle soft ground. But he'll go on either, won't he? The King George is the standout piece of form in his career, and it was achieved off a very strong pace on pretty fast ground.
The other reason I liked him going into the King George, Jamie, and Jamie wrote a brilliant piece about the Monson influence, the German breeding influence, was that they tend to be progressive and improve with racing. And I think this was like his 9th or 10th start, something like that. And it was the perfect kind of profile, I thought, for him to be really hitting the top of his ability.
Yeah, it's that typical German middle distance profile of a horse who gets better with age and with distance. But you're right to touch on the fast ground, and we all half suspected, will he be as effective on it? It turns out he's loved it. You look at his action there, look at how he's grabbing the ground, and think of the time. We talked about Trev's time and how it stacked up well in relation to the other trials. In terms of a pure time performance, nothing is anywhere near Novelist what he did in the King George there. He lopped nearly 2 seconds off the course record time. Now, I know it was set up for him in terms of a strong pace, but by the same token, it's something we have to think about. Trev might be a bit tricky, or Orfèvre, we know he's tricky. The other market leaders in the race are slightly conditional. They need a certain set of circumstances, perhaps, in order to shine. What we can see from Novelist, especially at Ascot, he's a very straightforward, powerful galloper. He can sit on either pace, and that might give him an extra advantage as well.
Good point. Yeah, good point.
I would agree with that. The only thing I would say, possibly to counter that argument, is that I think he really needs the strong pace and be allowed to find his stride and open up a long way out, which is something that at Longchamp isn't always the case. There's so many runners, they're going around the bend, you can be badly drawn, you can be forced to have an inside sit because you don't want to sit 5 or 6 wide, you can have to wait for a gap. And I would worry a little bit about Novelist not really being that kind of push-button horse.
Well, tactics can play a huge part. The draw can also play a big part in what kind of tactics you can employ, and certainly luck. Good luck and bad luck seems to be a factor increasingly in the running of this race. Let's have a look back at last year, because many people thought that Orfèvre could and should have won the race. But in the end, the record shows, James, he didn't.
Yeah, I mean, very galling for not just his trainer, his jockey, but for a whole nation. I mean, the Japanese, the kind of crowds you get in the big races, the Japan Cup, you know, 100,000 plus you get turning up for these big races in Japan. So they love their horse racing over there, and it has become this race. Jamie was talking earlier about how would you rank the Prix de l'Arc de Triomphe in terms of its standing around the world. Is it the biggest race in the world? The Japanese definitely feel that. You know, this is their holy grail. They've come very close a number of times. It almost would be impossible to come closer and not win than last year, because here is a horse who's sat stone last near enough, circled the entire field, done it oh so easily, quick and clear, and then just let his mind wander and thought, I've done enough. Started hanging, collided with the rail. You know, everything has happened. Everything that could go wrong in the last 100 yards has gone wrong. So he's good enough, but the thing about him and his price at the moment, and this is, I'm taking on board what Jamie said about him being tricky, is that that wasn't just a one-off last year in the Arc. He virtually ran off the course once early in 2012. I've never seen a horse. He still finished second, having forfeited 20 lengths, something like that. So that showed the latent talent is astonishing. And the other thing is, earlier, the reason why he hasn't raced much this season is he did bleed once this season in a workout. That's why he hasn't raced a lot. So for a reasonably short price favourite in a very, very good race, and I was tipping this horse up in this studio at 7-1 kind of a month or so ago. But now the price has gone for me because he's already shown that he's got quirks. And we've seen last year, if things can go wrong, he'll find them.
But on the other hand, Jamie, he's also shown that he comes into the race in good form, picking up the Prix en route as he did last year, winning it well.
Winning it well in a small field. Now look at Soumillon's body language here. He's ready for anything that Orfevre throws at him. He's almost on his right hand there. He's got a rail to run against, which obviously helps him. But Soumillon's body language tells me that he knows that this horse is tricky. He's ready for him. It was a piece of work, as they say in the end. But it's a tricky one to weigh up Orfevre, because I just echo James's sentiments. Naturally, you have to concentrate on the last 100 yards of last year's Arc, where he had the race at his mercy and threw it away. But for 19/20ths of the Arc, it was one of the most breathtaking Arc performances you've ever seen.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So he's a monster, but he's got a slight glitch.
He has got a slight glitch. I wonder, Frankie Dettori's told us already he wouldn't really want to swap from anything but Trev, but he's also given us his views on one or two of his rivals in the Arc, including Orfevre.
It was impressive, won really well. It wasn't a particularly great race, but the style of the way he put the race to bed was, he was pretty impressive, and he just got beat last year, so you got to have the utmost respect for him.
He was arguably a little bit unlucky last year. He sort of went, the race sat up, up you go, thank you very much, and then he gave it away.
Well, he had a bad draw, and I guess Christophe had to commit a bit early, and in the end it just ran out of petrol at the end.
Intello, he's on a bit of a recovery mission, but up in triple suit him.
Intello, well, he's running this weekend, so it'll be very interesting, because they'll be going up and down distances with him, and he ran placed in the Jacques Lemarrois over a mile. He won a French Derby over 10, so it'd be interesting to see how he runs this weekend. But obviously, the obvious ones, the novelist one, the King George, Al Kazim, and the Japanese horse. They're the obvious ones, and it's going to be a huge race.
Al Kazim, he's been beaten the last twice, but he bumped into a pretty quick mare on her day around that track.
I think the key thing with him, and Roger Charter says it all along, is the ground, and you're guaranteed to have moisture in the ground. It won't be any better than good or even soft. That's what they'd be looking for, basically, and I think with underfoot condition he'd be another player. So do Novelist. He's a horse that acts on any ground. He's a good stayer. He's had a break after King George, and he's won his prep race, so he's another one in the short list.
Frankie Dettori there with his views on who are other contenders, key contenders to bear in mind during the Arc de Triomphe, when running through the field for the Arc de Triomphe. From what he was saying, that you've said maybe the price has gone on Orfevre now?
Yeah, I think so.
Where would you look?
I think at the current prices, Trev would be where I would look.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. But you're a big Orfevre fan. You're a big
Oh
fan
no, I
going to race
completely
last year,
am.
weren't you?
I completely am. And for international racing, I think it would be a brilliant thing for the Japanese to get what that. I mean, after so much heartbreak, the likes of Deep Impact, and they've had brilliant. Nakayama Festa ran a brilliant race and finished second. El Condor Pasa ran an unbelievable race and got beaten. They've gone so close so many times that it would be great for global racing if they could win. But I just think 3-1. Is a bit skinny. You almost begin to wonder whether they've gone close so many times, whether there's a bit of a hex, and they might find the hex happening again this year in that they come across a great champion. And if there's a great champion almost in the Frankel mould here, it has to be Trev.
Okay, okay. Well, we'll get Jamie's view and your view as well on where we should be looking in this. There's a whole host of horses we haven't even touched on yet. Shouldn't forget, of course, that Andre Favre's horse was favourite up until he got beaten in his trial the other day. We'll have a look at that form shortly as well. But let's get more of your views with Enzo.
Thank you, Sean. You've got an email from Robert saying the best form in the Arc is surely Novelist. The 3-year-olds can't all be champions, says Robert. Trev beating Wild Coco is not the great form if the ground comes up soft. I guess it was more the manner of the victory, wasn't it, for Trev, rather than the strict line for the form. But Wild Coco, as James has mentioned, is a high-class filly. But there's only one winner, says Bob, and that's going to be Novelist. A couple of tweets as well. You mentioned, Sean, about horses we haven't mentioned yet. What about the Fugue? Still entered up for the Arc, not an absolute certain runner. But Felix says if the Fugue is confirmed, she must be the value, especially if he gets anywhere near her ground, which is another talking point. And Thomas Marriott mentions a horse that we showed you on At the Races on Saturday. Intello, says Thomas, best horse for the Arc. The step up in trip has a question mark, but I predict there'll be one answer to that step up in trip: improvement, says Thomas. So he thinks Intello will be better at 1.5 miles being by Galileo. Thank you very much for those emails. Keep those coming in. Go have a look at a few of the stats as well. I think this is interesting, especially if you're a fan of All Fair or Al Kazim, is the bad record that 5-year-olds have in the race. Looking back at the last 25 runnings, Marion Bard, the only horse aged over 4 to win the race. Marion Bard, of course, won it as a 5-year-old back in 2002 under Frankie Dettori, and since then 17 have tried and they've all failed, so it's a bit of a negative against Al Kazim and Orfevre. 15 of the last 19 runnings, it's not a bad rate, is it, have gone to a 3-year-old. It's the classic generation do come good in the Arc. Fillies and mares, they've got, this was a stat I thought was fascinating, they've got a fantastic recent record. Okay, it's not taking a massive sample, but recently the last 9 fillies or mares that have run in the race have won. The Great Zarkava, Dane Dream and Salemia, of course, last year. Now, looking at Aidan O'Brien's record, this is one of those stats that you might think looks pretty poor when you look at it. 1 winner from his last 30 runners in the Arc for Aidan O'Brien. That, of course, was Dylan Thomas in 07. However, when you go through it, I'd say at least 8 of those horses like Robin Hood and a few others, were there to ensure the gallop was good for a better fancy stablemate. So again, I'd take that 1 from 30, perhaps with a pinch of salt, that stat, but it doesn't look good when you put it on paper. Epsom Derby winners. Of those that have contested the Arc, 3 of the last 9 have won. The likes of Workforce, of course, did the double in 2010. See the Stars won the Derby and also won the Arc in 2009. And Sindar did it way back in 2000 as well. So people say, Derby winners don't win the Arc. It's not entirely true. The record isn't too bad. 3 from the last 9. Of course, Camelot failed spectacularly last year. The conclusion for me, I'll put all that into the machine, press the button, it's come up with Trev. Because the low draw is another fact, isn't it? Salemia drawn 6 last year. Dane Dream drawn 2. Low draw is another factor. Of course, we haven't had the draw yet, but I think you put it into the machine, Boise, you come up with Trev because you've got a low drawn 3-year-old filly.
Very few of us have been allowed access to the shed at the bottom of Enzo's garden where that machine lives, but I can assure you it's quite some sight. Back after this.